So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants and presenters who have joined us today. We are delighted to have such excellent participation for this APEC tourism workshop, On the Road Perspectives from Travellers and Tourism Service Providers, organised and sponsored by Australia on behalf of the APEC Tourism Working Group. My name is Bonnie Rivendell. I am a Program Director at RMIT University, and I'll be introducing today's session. Firstly, I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of Australia's Indigenous people. Performing an acknowledgement of country is an important part of the path toward reconciliation within the Australian community. As such, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the East Kulin Nations, the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri people where I am speaking from today, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge the elders from all the lands and language groups across Australia and all other APEC economies. Our facilitator today is Martin Heng. Martin is an innovation educator who has been working with tourism MSMEs across the Asia Pacific for many years. And I'm very much looking forward to the speakers and the agenda that he has pulled together over the coming 2 days. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Good day, everyone, and welcome to the second Tourism Accessibility Workshop. The first session in the series was designed to set the scene with an introduction to inclusive or accessible tourism, an indication of the huge potential of the market, and some recently released guidelines by leading tourism NGOs. Today, we leave theory behind and meet people engaged in inclusive tourism, either as travelers themselves or as tourism service providers. In our first session, we have the honor of meeting some of the world's most successful and well-known accessible travel bloggers, who will tell us why they do what they do, apart from the love of travel, of course. In the second session, we'll hear from tour operators from both developed and developing economies who have amassed valuable experience in catering to travelers with access needs. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists for the first session. I'll be brief because speakers' full bios will be updated to the website in due course. Lyn Olson, who became paralyzed in a car accident in 1998, established wheelchairtraveling.com in 2006. It has since become a leading resource for accessible travel information with a reach of 120,000 per month. Sylvia Longmire is a service-disabled US Air Force veteran, full-time wheelchair user, and former Miss Wheelchair USA, who has become a successful accessible travel writer with an award-winning travel blog, spintheglobe.net. John Morris has flown more than 1 million miles as a wheelchair user and triple amputee. He has become a leading advocate for accessibility and inclusion in the travel industry, and his website, wheelchairtravel.org, is chock full of information and destination guides to assist wheelchair users to navigate the world. Cory Lee was diagnosed with muscular atrophy at the age of 2, but that hasn't stopped him from visiting all 7 continents in his powered wheelchair while running his award-winning travel blog, curbfreewithcorylee.com, where he shares his accessible and sometimes not so accessible travel adventures with others. Judy Jones, whose son has cerebral palsy, has worked as a travel consultant for over 20 years and is the editor and co-founder of Travel Without Limits, which is almost certainly the world's only disability-specific travel magazine in print. She also maintains the website havewheelchairwilltravel.net to share reviews of tourism attractions and experiences. So, Ashley, I'll start with you. When did you, we've learned that you started blogging in 2006. So why did you decide to set up a website?
Well, like many of the other panelists here, I found a lack of information available online as well as at visitor centers, different chambers of commerce, city centers, you name it, or just calling hotels or businesses directly. They were quite timid about giving information. They didn't want to tell me, oh yes, for sure, this is accessible. I wouldn't really get the whole story. So, and there was nothing on Google or Yelp yet either. I mean, like there was really nothing online for the most part. There was a couple of mom and pop type blogs where you would literally have to scroll through absolutely everything on their website to find whatever you were looking for. And I wanted just an easier way to document and get what I was looking for, and not just information that I had necessarily found and I was looking for, but I wanted to open up the platform to other people with limited mobility and other wheelchair travelers, so they could share their experiences, because my interests are going to be different than somebody else's, and what my abilities and what I'm willing to put up with and not willing to put up with are going to be different. So I feel like in terms of the world, like disability and accessible, there's such a spectrum. And I really wanted just to show, okay, like this is how they did it. This person in a power chair, this was in a manual chair. They used this equipment. They had a caretaker. They did it on their own. This is how they got it done, just to kind of basically empower the next person, to travel on their own, or to travel, just like the person that they saw.
So there was a
Really wanted to
void
give
back in
people a chance,
2006.
just
There
like
was a
anybody
huge
else,
void.
really. What's that?
So back in 2006, there was a huge void. I mean, this was when the internet was less developed than it is today.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I built my first site. Well, actually, I started to document on MySpace, and then I took some coding skills that I learned from there and transferred it to my first website, and I've done 7 since then. And yeah, those first couple of years, I mean, technology and websites were changing so fast that how to keep up with it.
Well, it's a boon to us, and it's a boon to many people, the internet, in terms of being able to provide and access information. So turning to you, John, what do you see as your main role as a travel blogger? Why did you take up travel blogging?
I recall I have an acquired disability. I had a car accident in 2012, and I took my first trip as a wheelchair user in 2014. So obviously the information was much more developed at that point, but still lacking in the sense that obviously it's a very big world out there, and I wanted to go to places that hadn't yet been written about by anyone from an accessibility perspective. And so, outside of Ashley's website, I found that a lot of the information that did exist was unreliable. It was written often by non-disabled people who did not understand the needs of wheelchair users or the meaning of accessibility. And so in developing my website, I view my primary role as connecting disabled people with the information and resources that can be used to ease their journey and bring opportunities, new opportunities, and putting those within reach of them. And so that really is the mission that I have pursued.
So do you see your role as an accessible travel blogger as any different from the role of mainstream travel bloggers?
Well, absolutely. I think that, obviously I travel independently as a power wheelchair user, and I've flown a lot of miles and stayed in hundreds of hotels. And so that is the perspective from which I'm able to write. And that generates a level of confidence among my readers in the information that I'm able to share, because they know that I've been there and I've done that and had those experiences, and they're able to travel more confidently as a result. In comparing myself to a mainstream non-disabled travel writer, I think that there is a big difference, because if they lead people astray, their readers, it's a hotel that didn't amaze them, it's a meal that didn't delight. Whereas for my readers, if I get something wrong, they could be stranded without transportation. They could be unable to bathe in their hotel room or to use a toilet, or even worse. And so, that's a big responsibility that I take very seriously. And it's why on my website, I only write about places that I've been personally, and in most cases, multiple times, because the stakes are very high, and I'm not willing to take my readers' safety and their enjoyment, for granted. It's my job to provide them with the resources that will allow them to travel safely and confidently. And so I have to get that right.
Yeah, I feel like all of us being in wheelchairs is so important because, even my own mother, for example, yes, she knows a lot about my disability and what works and what doesn't work for me, but she doesn't know what it's like to, have to push all day in a manual wheelchair, or what it's like to having to time where you go because you're in a power wheelchair and you only have so much battery life. There's all these little things that we have to think about, and maneuvering around in different spaces, and what's going to work. And you only really know that if you actually live it, and you really experience it.
There is a real importance with this lived experience and sharing that lived experience. So, already there are themes coming out: importance of information, importance of accurate information, and importance of information that's been verified on the ground. Cory, if I can turn to you now, I mean, you've had a huge success with your website, and you've also had huge success in terms of your social media presence. Now, I regard you as the social media king, actually, and maybe you can share some of your stats with the audience.
So on social media, I have a little over 65,000 followers across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Facebook and Instagram are kind of the only social media channels that I'm using now, because I think Twitter has kind of died and I never get any engagement when I post. So I'm pretty much sticking only to Facebook and Instagram now. But yeah, they maybe even more so than the blog. I'm really, really focused on social media right now and engaging with my followers.
So why are you moving away more from your blog and using social media more? What purpose is that serving?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely still using the blog. I don't want to make it sound like I'm leaving it behind and moving completely away, but I think
you're probably using social media to direct people to your blog.
Yeah, of course. Oh yeah, definitely using it to direct people to my blog. And I really think that social media is so great because I'm able to interact in real time with my followers. So, if I'm posting a blog post about an accessible hotel, maybe putting 10 photos in there, it's not the same as actually, going on Facebook Live, doing a tour of that hotel room, letting them see it in real time. And I think that's so valuable to be able to actually see it in real time and ask questions. So I'm doing a lot of live content on Facebook and Instagram, and also like things like Instagram Reels and videos, because I mean, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, I think a video is even more. And I think it's especially valuable for our community of wheelchair users, just to be able to actually see what's there. So just being able to interact with my followers in real time and posting valuable video content has really been a game changer for me.
Interesting.
I feel like that's just even more proof just how hungry everybody is, how hungry this community is. They're like, hi, like we want to follow you and let us know right now what you're doing and show us. And I mean, people are so hungry for this information.
It's information. It's hungry for information, and we've come a long way since 2006. We've been trying for years to get hotels and other service providers to put pictures up at least. Now we have the ability to have a Facebook Live videos and live video tours. It's quite remarkable.
Can I also add about social media? I think when you're engaging with your audience, you also get to learn more about what they need and the variety of needs within the disability community. And I think that's super important because, as everyone said before, there's no one size fits all. And knowing what people need means that you can better serve your audience. And also, when you interact with businesses, tell them more about other people's needs, not just your own needs.
Definitely.
I mean, there's a huge gamut of I mean, there are a number of wheelchair users on this panel, and your son also, Julie, is a wheelchair user, but all our needs are completely different. And the only way that we can really understand truly whether our needs will be met when we reach a place or a hotel is by seeing. Is actually by seeing and judging for ourselves.
I remember just exactly what Julie's kind of talking about, being a mother. I really love roll-in showers, and I was really advocating, oh yes, roll-in showers. But then really early on in building the website, I came across a family, and they're like, oh no, we do not like roll-in showers. Having a handicap accessible bathtub with the grab bars makes it a lot easier for us to actually assist our child in and out of the bathtub, which makes perfect sense. So everybody has such different needs, including, yeah, I mean, like families, maybe you have a family member also in a wheelchair as well, and that just adds another wild card into the mix. So there's just so many different variables.
That points up, I mean, I had an experience where I booked a hotel room in England, which was supposedly accessible. And then just before I left Australia, I made sure, and yes, of course, it was a bathtub with a handheld shower. I was like, how am I supposed to get in there? I had no idea. I thought accessible was always going to be a roll-in shower, but yeah, different countries have different ideas of what's accessible and what's not, and different people have different needs. Sylvia, hi, if I could turn to you now. I have a question about what's so-called FAM trips or familiarization trips. Now, many people across the travel industry use FAM trips to promote their destination or promote their facilities, and it seems like to many people these are just junkets. But actually, I think as John has said, in another context, they're really, really important for our community. Can you explain why that would be?
Sure. So for the audience, if you're not familiar with what a FAM trip or a press trip is, it's basically when a tourism board or a destination pays a blogger money or compensates them for their stay with food and hotel stay in order to write about the attractiveness, or in our case, the accessibility or lack thereof of a destination. And to be perfectly blunt, because I like to be honest when we talk about these things, it's a complicated relationship because we get some heat about it because, you get paid all this money to travel around or whatever, but we have a very important job to do. And it's complicated because we have two masters when we go on familiarization trips. We have our audience, and then we have our client who is paying us. I do not accept a press trip unless my client is okay with me telling the truth, albeit in a very polite and nice way, about the accessibility, because just as John was talking about earlier, we have a responsibility to our audience, to our readers, to our social media followers, to tell them the truth, because it's a safety issue. And the last thing I want to do is to lead somebody on about the accessibility of a place just because this destination is paying me money. Now, that being said, it is extremely important to the tourism board that is bringing us on these familiarization trips to get our honest feedback. And every FAM trip that I've been on, my clients have been extremely happy when I tell them, hey, this was not great. This was not good. This really needs to be improved upon. If you did this, you would attract more tourists in wheelchairs or with mobility challenges, or et cetera, et cetera. So when they bring us, number one, that means that the tourism board is very interested in promoting the accessibility, which of course we want as much of that as we can get. They're interested in our point of view, and they generally really want our honest feedback because they want to do better. So again, it's complicated for us because we're serving these two masters, but ultimately I think they're a good thing. Yes, it's fun for us, but it gives us the opportunity to visit a place that maybe we might not normally go if we were spending our own money on it. It gives us a chance to help improve the accessibility of various destinations, both large and small. And ultimately it gets some really good tourism information to wheelchair users and other people with disabilities out there to get out and maybe visit some of these places.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's not just a one-way street. We're not. You guys are not, or we guys are not getting something for nothing. We're assessing a destination. We're assessing the facilities. We get the opportunity to give feedback, but most importantly, again, we're eyes on the ground, wheels around the room, and we can really give some and some verified feedback on the facilities and on the destination, which is going to be useful to the rest of the community. And I think this is something that I've really appreciated with the accessible travel community, is how willing we are to share with each other. Because we realize, as we've all said today, we all have a responsibility to make sure that accurate information is out there so people can make up their own minds about whether something is suitable for them or not.
I also think the destinations get better value for money, to be honest, out of a fam trip with people with a disability, because they get the feedback. They often get images that they don't normally have, because it's just not that common to have the ability to get people with a disability for photos that they can use for their destination. And that feedback's invaluable for them. Like, it's really valuable if it's delivered in the right way, obviously. So I think it's actually more valuable to them than probably most familiarizations, where they just get a story in a paper and it's gone and dusted, because we also have very engaged audiences that trust us and know us.
And I feel like confidence as well, like the business, once you actually engage with a business and give them a couple of tools, they feel that they can give that information out to the world. They're like, yes, okay, I'm more informed, you know, they're more empowered, they know kind of more what to expect, and they can serve this community, they can serve more customers more confident.
I think that's right. I think that there is generally an apprehension, if not a fear, among tourism service providers that they are going to fail. They are, and they don't want to let people with disabilities down. So yes,
Yeah.
it does give them
And
confidence.
they just don't know how to make it accessible. A lot of the cases, sometimes they do, but majority of the time they just don't know how to make it more accessible, or all these little tweaks, you know, and the little ideas that we all give them.
Part of our role, or part of your role, is education and advocacy. Julie, if I can turn to you now. Travel Without Limits, as I said, I think as far as we know, it's the only magazine in print dedicated to accessible travel in the world. So at a time when print is in kind of regarded as a bit of a dying medium and the internet is king, why did you decide to publish in a hard copy format?
It's a little bit of a passion project for me, because when my son was first diagnosed with cerebral palsy and a wheelchair became part of our reality, I looked for information. I looked to the Sunday paper. I looked in all the beautiful glossy travel brochures, and there was just nothing. There was nothing that represented our family. You had people climbing every mountain and, you know, doing all these really active things, but there just wasn't any representation. So I feel like the disability community really deserves this kind of publication, and it's glossy, and it serves two purposes. Not only does it prove to hopefully inspire and educate people traveling with a disability as to what's available, but it also educates the tourism industry to see people that are doing whitewater rafting or skydiving, or, you know, what their needs are as a family. And we also cover not just wheelchair accessibility, we cover autism, we cover vision, hearing, sort of the whole spectrum. And I think it would be very hard to ever get that, even probably in one blog. So the magazine really does that, and the print's been embraced. It's also available on Amazon to download, all English-speaking Amazons, and Virgin In-Flights Entertainment. So people can have it in a digital format if they prefer, but we ship worldwide, and we found that people really have embraced having the print magazine. A lot of therapists keep it in their, you know, therapy rooms for their clients. A lot of people give it. We've just actually had one of the shopping malls here in Australia put in an order, because they're very focused on access and inclusive sort of business, and they really wanted to give something to their customers that was representing what they stand for.
I think that's really important that, you know, as you said, it reaches an audience that wouldn't necessarily come across this kind of material generally, because they wouldn't necessarily search it out on the internet, but they would pick up the magazine in their therapist's rooms or surgery, and they have access to information. But also, I think really importantly, and this has come over a couple of times, representation. And I think Ashley said the same. You know, it's difficult to imagine yourself traveling unless you see others traveling if you have a disability, and the same goes for many other different areas of life. You know, unless there's representation, unless there are role models, then it's difficult for people to kind of jump over their own shadows and get out there on the road.
My son's also non-verbal, so it's quite a different situation to many of the panelists here. So when he goes to his, where he used to go to a day service where there are other people with disability, I found a lot of the support workers and carers were quite limiting in what they felt he should do, what he was capable of. So it's, really fantastic to show them, like an organisation like that, who are actually providing care, that there's a whole range of things that people with disability can do, whether they're non-verbal, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether, they have a hidden disability. So I think it also provides really good educational value for others who are, caring for people with disability.
Thank you very much. I believe, and I've said this in the first session, that since UNWTO declared 2017 World Tourism Day of Tourism for All, that there has been an explosion of interest in inclusive tourism. Can anyone think of positive changes that have occurred in the last 3 or 4 years? Sylvia.
So I'm a very big ocean cruiser. Prior to COVID, I was going on anywhere from 6 to 8 cruises a year. I've been on every major cruise line except for Cunard. I just got back from the Virgin Voyages Scarlet Lady, and that was such an adventure. And I've been cruising for a really, really long time. And that is probably the industry, or I should say the sector within the travel industry, that I've noticed the most positive changes. New ships are coming out like a dozen every year. Obviously with COVID, it's different. So we're talking about in regular situations. And I always tell my readers, and when I was still running my travel agency, my clients, that the newer the ship, the better the accessibility, because they are constantly building. You take a look at the demographics of people who go on cruises, and they tend to be, they skew older in many cases. So you're not just talking about people who are cruising, who are wheelchair users like us who have a disability. You're talking about people who are have a lot of money to spend and are older and are using scooters, they're using walkers, they're using manual wheelchairs, they're renting different mobility devices. And that's a very large demographic in the cruise industry. So they go where the money is. And I feel like they're finally starting to realize how big and how valuable the disability market is. So I'm seeing continual improvements in accessibility. For example, on the Scarlet Lady, everything in my accessible stateroom was automated, right down to a motion sensor for the door to open to and from my bathroom, which was phenomenal. Everything was controlled from a tablet in my stateroom. The lights, the curtains, I mean, the TV, everything. So I could take that tablet with me into bed. So if I got too hot in the middle of the night, I could control the temperature control in my stateroom from that tablet without having to get out of bed, which is a whole process. But that being said, there's still improvements that can be made. As amazing as all that was, there was no automatic door opener for the door into my stateroom. But you can find that on Carnival ships, on Royal Caribbean ships, on Disney ships. So that was, kind of strange. Why would you do all this stuff? Now, I did not have to manually open a single door on that entire ship. So they're getting better about automatic doors going in between all public spaces. And also the availability of accessible shore excursions. You have some real pioneers in that regards. John Sage, particularly, who is really making some connections. He made an agreement with Disney Cruise Line not long ago to help increase the availability of accessible shore excursions. And that is helping to bring the price down. But that's still a big obstacle for us in that we're paying sometimes 3, 4, 5 times as much as non-disabled cruisers just to get off the ship and go on a tour. So the more availability there is within the cruise industry for accessible shore excursions that we can book through Princess, through Royal Caribbean, through Carnival, etc., that helps make the experience more affordable for us and more accessible to people with disabilities.
Thanks. I mean, I think that brings to light a couple of different things. First of all, as you say, technology. Technology is so important to people in the disability communities. My brother was a quadriplegic as well, and he became a quadriplegic at the end of the last century, and I saw his independence improve dramatically year on year with technological development, and that's obviously been taken up by the cruise lines, as you say, and elsewhere throughout life. And the other thing you were talking about was, the fact that as we've saw in the first session, a lot of the people with a lot of money to travel are retiring baby boomers. And tourism, and like any other business, they will follow the money.
Yeah.
They have the money and they have the leisure to travel, and they would not necessarily identify as disabled, but they still have the same or similar access needs to many of the rest of us. We've talked a lot about here in this session about information, the importance of information, and there's a void of information out there. Can anyone think of an example of best practice of a tourism service provider, a facility, or any other provider who has a best example of best practice in terms of provision of information? Julie, you had your hand up there.
I can. I was really thrilled to work with a holiday park in New South Wales here that has done an exceptional job of providing accessible cabins, villas, they've shown a real understanding. They put their park managers into wheelchairs and asked them to get around the property to have a better understanding. I know, how fabulous is that? And when they've built the cabins, they've put in really expensive features, which was a gamble, I guess, for them, because they weren't sure how it would go. They were doing something quite unique. So all their cupboards lower and raised. So if you need a glass from the top cupboard, you press a button and it lowers the stovetop can be adjusted for your wheelchair height. But what I really like is that they had me come in and they said, we want you to stay. We want you to give us honest feedback, what you think about it. You know, we want to hear the raw truth of it, which I thought was great. And then they were putting together their website and putting information. I said, well, make sure you have accessibility front and center. That's my number one tip for any business. Make sure it's easily found. And they were describing
yes. All businesses listening, yes, please.
They were describing
put your information on the site.
They were describing their accommodation as wheelchair friendly, and I said, don't use that weak term. It's not wheelchair friendly. It is wheelchair accessible. So be proud and use it, and put all the measurements on the website. So I'm really thrilled that you go to the accessibility tab. You go to the cabin, they have videos on how to, what the cabin is like, which is great because, as Cory said, it's good to see a video, not just photos that are taken with a wide angle camera showing off the best possible, version of it. And they have all the measurements for the toilet from the floor to the seat, the floor to the pan, just because people bring their own commodes and travel and might have the height of the bed, the doorways, everything, all that information is on there, and they're extremely proud of it. They're actually finalists at the moment for an accessibility award, and I hope they win it because they really went above and beyond. And what is really interesting from a business standpoint is that they have said that they could be booked out, pretty much every week of the year with respite groups that are desperate to have accommodation for their clients. But they wanted to make sure it was open to leisure travellers as well. But the return on it has shown that it was well worth the investment in a very short turnaround.
That's fabulous, and I mean that points up the fact it's not enough just to have accessible facilities. It's equally important is to make sure that people know about them, because it's not a question of if we build it they will come. Nobody will come unless they know about it. So build it and then let people know about it.
I feel like Martin, consistency though with businesses is still definitely an issue. Like even just in the United States alone, you can look at a hotel chain in the same city and you're going to find different accessible accommodations, different details. The shower is going to be placed slightly differently, or, the towel rack is going to be put in a different weird spot, something like that. So in terms of hotel chains and just chain businesses in general, it would be so wonderful to have some kind of consistency, or yes, of course, videos, detailed imagery or whatnot. But
that's right. I mean, hotels particularly don't like to show pictures of their bathrooms, and when they do, it's an arty shot of a rose on in front of the mirror, or nicely folded hand towels. And standards are important. I mean, the consistency is important, and you can't even get that within one country. Now, Cory, you're incredibly well traveled across many countries. How have you found it traveling between countries? The expectations are different and the standards are different. How do you manage when you're kind of not quite sure about what you're going to encounter in a new country?
So whenever I'm traveling, I mean, I really start planning a trip, I mean, pretty far in advance. I mean, up to a year in advance, really, or even more. I'm already planning a trip for the end of next year, an international trip. So it's a
And what does
lengthy
that planning
process.
involve?
It's mostly, I mean, figuring out transportation. That's kind of the number one thing that I usually start with because, I mean, if the transportation isn't accessible, then I'm going to be stuck at the airport when I get there and unable to leave. So that's kind of the most important thing for me. And then aside from that, hotels. So finding an accessible hotel that will actually work. So usually, no matter where I'm staying, whether it's here in the US or internationally, I'll either call or email that hotel and ask for the general manager and request photos of the accessible room. Just so, I mean, photos don't work 100% of the time as well as I hope they would, but they do a pretty good job and are much better than just the standard room photos that are on the hotel website. So I think, you know, just seeing that information and figuring it out well in advance is well worth it, but also reaching out to other wheelchair users and Facebook groups. I mean, the Accessible Travel Club on Facebook, I go in there, research to see if any other wheelchair users that have my disability have gone there, what hotel have they stayed in. I'll ask Sylvia, I mean, look on John's website, Ashley's site, Julie, all these incredible people here on this panel just to see if they've been there, because I know, you know, if they've been there, done that within that destination, then it's most likely possible for me. And I think that's incredibly important to know.
Yeah, and that's the confidence issue, you know. I mean, to have the confidence before you actually, you know, the whole planning process is to increase your confidence that you'll be catered for and you'll have a good time when you get there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
It's not just about the hotel room being accessible. It's really end to end. All elements of the tourism chain need to be accessible. And John, I think, you know, I find your destination guides are very useful in that respect because you really do drill down to the detail.
I think in putting those together, I was trying to answer the primary questions of the types of information that I'm looking for when I travel. And like Cory said, the first place that I start is transportation because, you know, I need to find a way to get from the airport to the hotel in an accessible manner, whether that's public transport, taxi, or some sort of other transportation service that has that accessibility that I need. I have a nearly 200 kilogram power wheelchair that can't be stowed in the back of a car. And so I do need that accessible transportation, and there are millions more people who need that as well. And so the travel guides that I produce include transport information, but I also look at the accessibility of hotels within a destination, the various attractions that are available to participate in, the services that are available at the airport for guests who are either arriving or departing from that location. And so I think together, all of these things provide people with a roadmap for figuring out how to access the destination. And they're willing, you know, they're able to dive in as deep as they'd like, or look on the surface as well. These are resources that help demystify the idea of accessible travel a little bit.
So again, to give people confidence that they're going to have a good time when they get there because they know what to expect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel that you are documenting and helping, but documenting for other people information? You're also helping to educate the tourism industry, but do you see yourselves as change makers?
Yes.
Yes.
We all are,
Trendsetters?
definitely. I mean, we're all paving the way, you know, we're showing what's possible, how to do it, what works, what doesn't work, you know, how to overcome this barrier, how to get around that obstacle.
I think we'd probably all have an example too of something that has changed as a result of our visit or our feedback or something, which is, you know, highly rewarding as, you know, somebody who wants to make a difference in the tourism industry and who's passionate about travel and passionate about making sure everyone can travel. That's the best part of what I do is, you know, actually feeling like I'm making a difference.
Yeah, I feel like it's not even about thinking about it, you know, on a bigger scale, even though I know we're all world travelers, but it's like, I think about, okay, my own hometown or my own city. It's like, well, I want somebody just to feel confident to be able to go out in their own city and explore and live life and do things. I mean, that's still definitely a part of travel. It's part of everyday life.
And I think we've heard this from other panelists in other sessions as well. Basically, if you make a destination more accessible for tourists, then of course you're making it much more accessible for residents.
That's the whole concept of universal design. I had the pleasure of being part of a class on accessible technology and universal design here in Central Florida. And one of the examples that I gave in one of the lectures that I gave them is how does a city or even a town invest their money or invest money at all to make a place more accessible? Do you invest money in research for one of those really cool wheelchairs that the wheels stack on top of each other and have treads like a caterpillar, you know, backhoe, and can climb upstairs? And then you're stuck with this huge machine. Like, yeah, I can go upstairs, but will it fit through the doorway at the top of the stairs? How are you going to use it to go to the toilet? How are you going to get it in your car? And it only helps one person. So for that $35,000 or however, $60,000 or whatever that's being invested in one machine for one person, that's money you can invest in concrete to put in more curb drops, or aluminum to put in a ramp. And when you make these situations universally accessible, and they can be very attractive, because I've seen some really, really good looking universal accessibility solutions for steps and for ramps. So it doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't have to be industrial. So
And it can be portable too.
Exactly. So not only is it helping us, but it's helping senior citizens, and it's helping mother. I'm a mom. I have 2 boys, helping mothers with babies and strollers, because I've been to Munich and seen poor mothers trying to keep their children still sleeping in the stroller while they're going over cobblestones. And that is nobody's idea of a good time. So yes, universal accessibility and universal design not only helps us, but it makes it easy for everybody.
Does anybody else have anything to offer in terms of positive experiences they've had when they've gone to a place and given some feedback that's resulted in changes that will help future travelers?
I remember I was in Charleston and went to their art museum, and they had this nice side entrance that was all nicely paved. They had a sign, okay, this is our accessible entrance. So I'm okay, yes, points there. Automatic doors, you know, go through the whole museum, have a lovely time, everything's accessible. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna use the restroom before I continue out exploring. And I go to use the restroom, handicap signs everywhere, even on the handicap bathroom, big sign, handicap, you know, for handicapped people. Okay, close the door. I'm in my manual wheelchair, very small manual wheelchair. I am flipping my one wheel up to try to close the door and still cannot close the door whatsoever. And I was just shocked that they had spent all of this money, all of this time and effort with all these signs and pathways and whatnot. And their bathroom was obviously not big whatsoever. And so I brought it to their attention. And again, they just had no idea. Nobody had said anything to them. And so they did a fundraiser and raised money to make it accessible.
Yeah, feedback is king.
Definitely. That's one example. There's millions that we have.
Thank you.
I think also all of us personalizing our stories. So instead of it just being a person with a disability that they're providing something for, the fact that we can personalize the stories. And I know for myself, I take my readers' stories when they tell me they their husband doesn't want to travel to, say, the Central Australia because on a 3-hour flight, there's no accessible bathroom on the plane. That's a story that I tell to everyone because I think that people aren't really thinking of the ins and outs of travel, just the basics. Like we're talking, you know, as Cory said, we're flying people to space, but we still don't have an accessible bathroom on a domestic flight, you know, in Australia. Why?
Yeah.
Why is that?
And I really want to hear you tell the story of how you got all that support to convince American Airlines to allow wheelchairs like yours on those smaller regional jets.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. Actually, it was really just reversing a policy. I'm a very frequent flyer on American Airlines. They're my carrier of choice here in the United States. And during the pandemic, they instituted a new policy that would ban heavy power wheelchairs like mine from certain aircraft. Now, there wasn't a reason for that. The aircraft manufacturer disagreed and said that it wasn't necessary, that the aircraft could accommodate those. And so, together with a large group of disability organizations and my readers, and I think the support of these bloggers who are here on this panel today, we were able to get the DOT to intervene here in the U.S. and reverse that policy, and so that was exciting. But you know, I think one of the things that I wanted to say, Martin, was that so many more disabled people are traveling because information is becoming more available to them, and each of us here on this call have convinced at least one and probably hundreds, thousands of people with disabilities to get out there and take that trip. And as a result of this increased demand for accessible travel, my phone is ringing all the time from businesses that want to take advantage of the opportunity that exists in the marketplace and to become more accessible. And I'm really excited about that. I'm excited just from this panel here, which I think 5-10 years ago would not have happened. And so we are making progress. And that is in large part due to the fact that so many more disabled people are out there braving the elements as they exist today and taking the risk to travel accessibly.
Yep, and success breeds success, and as tourism service providers realize that this market is big and growing, because as you say, more people, not only are more people with disabilities traveling, also I think more people who have acquired access needs through age are also traveling, and businesses are waking up to the fact that this is a huge and untapped market. So just before we finish, I'd like to whip around each of you and ask, if there's one thing you could ask that could be changed, no matter whether it be a service tourism provider or governments or whoever. What if there's one thing you would like to change? What would it be? And I'll start with you, Julie.
I'd say information is key. I always say to people, don't tell me what's accessible, show me the accessibility, because we often do things with our son that would not fit the true accessibility box. And if we're prepared to put in the effort, we just want the information to be available.
That's right. So information is, as we've said, is king. And if we're shown what's there, we can make our own minds up, and that also enhances our own levels of independence and decision making. Ashley.
Definitely along the same lines, information, but just want to emphasize online information. Have a page or a tab or a section on your website that tells us what's accessible. Do you have parking in the front, in the back? Is there a side entrance? Is there public transportation nearby? What do we need to know to use your business? Give us some kind of clue. And I feel like businesses also need to take into consideration making their websites screen reader friendly, because I have a lot of dear friends who use this technology and they want to know the information as well. So we want to get them out there as well, and they need that information. So we need to make more websites screen reader friendly.
So two things there. First of all, make sure your website's accessible to people with disabilities, but also often any kind of accessibility information, if it's there at all, is hidden away under FAQs. Have a really prominent accessibility button or accessibility menu, and have all the facilities, and not just within the hotel, as you say, but also in and surrounding the hotel, and things that relate to travel from that hotel. Cory, what would you change? What would you like to be changed, or what changes you would like to see?
I mean, I definitely agree with everything that Ashley and Julie said, but for me, I would change air travel for sure. I mean, I think, for it to be 2021, the state of the air travel industry is terrible. It's never an easy process. It's a constant struggle for me to fly. And so if it's within, even a 15-hour drive, I would prefer to just drive somewhere. I mean, I drove all the way to New York City and up to Salem, Massachusetts last month in October, and it's a long way from where I live in the state of Georgia here in the US. So air travel is just super complicated. People are literally dying from a lack of accessibility in air travel. And Gracia Figueroa recently died from complications after an injury from a flight with United Airlines.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just insane to me that we are in 2021 and still dealing with a lack of accessible air travel. So hopefully it will improve. I know there are great organizations like All Wheels Up, which is doing amazing things to make air travel more accessible. So hopefully within the next decade, we'll see some changes, but hopefully before then.
Yep. Well, absolutely. My least favorite part of traveling is the aircraft. Always uncomfortable and inconvenient and just to be something to be born to get to where you want to go. Sylvia.
So I'm going to go a little macro with my response. I'm a practical person, and I realize that money makes the world go round, and the tourism industry is all about the money. I find, at least here in the United States, that many businesses do the bare minimum just to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and don't necessarily always go out of their way to do things to make things more accessible out of the kindness of their hearts. So I would love to see the tourism industry recognize the value of the disability market. And as I think everybody here on this panel knows, at least in the United States, $17.3 billion every year just on accessible travel alone that we are spending every year. And you don't see us in commercials, so you don't see us in ads. Maybe I think there's one for Delta, but you do not see people with disabilities nearly as often in proportion to how many of us there are in society in ads and in commercials. And that tells me that we are greatly undervalued. So if they start making accessibility a priority and investing the money, that means that we start paying them the money. So we need the tourism sector to realize that they make the investment in us and we will make it more profitable for them. I would love to see that realization happen. That's
really important, representation. Yeah, unless we see ourselves represented, then we don't see it. We don't see that they're marketing to us. So if every on tourism, actually, this is one thing that tourism is very guilty of, is that you'd think that only people who are like 25 to 35 and beautiful actually enjoy tourism experiences, because nobody else has ever shown on promotional materials, which is a nonsense, of course.
I remember being in Australia and seeing a significantly higher presence of people in wheelchairs on talk shows and commercials and on the street advertisements. Just night and day difference compared to America. I mean, we need to be on talk shows. We need to be on, at the train station on a poster. Like, I want to see people everywhere, in wheelchairs and different disabilities.
I think we do quite well in Australia. We've got a couple of high-profile reporters in wheelchairs, and we have a couple of high-profile people who take talk shows and host talk shows here, who are in wheelchairs. So it's a really good thing in representation. Yeah. And John, finally, before we move on, what's one thing you would change?
Well, just a note on Sylvia's statistic there. That 17 billion actually has increased, I think, to 28 billion now. There's been a new updated study from the Open Doors organization. So that's exciting. But I think what I would change is just our mindset around what accessibility is. I think that true accessibility is that which maximizes one's independence to the extent that's feasible. And so, just as an example, in Washington, D.C., our capital city here in the United States, we have a fantastic metro system. I can use it end to end with my wheelchair and never need the assistance of another person. But when I go to another city like New York or London, I need other people to assist me, to lay down a ramp, to tell me which stations are not accessible, because there are a lot of stations that don't have a ramp or a lift. And true accessibility is that which maximizes my independence so that I can exist freely and without needing the intervention of others. And so anywhere that we can promote the accessibility of disabled people, I think that that's fantastic and should be highlighted. And I'd like us to look towards accessibility and accessible design, universal design with that idea of, how can we, help people to visit our destination and be as independent as possible.
Thank you very much, John. I think that's a great point in which to finish. Is that all we're asking is for equal opportunity and equal access and equal opportunity to be to enjoy tourism experiences as independently as other people. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And I will undoubtedly be in touch with you all again very soon. And thank you again.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Now let's hear from tour operators with experience in catering to travelers with access needs. So I think we're going to start with a very inspirational video. So that was a video from Making Trax from Jezza Williams in New Zealand, and I think anything you want. I think that's the message. Is basically just because you might have access needs or a disability doesn't mean that you need to be limited in your aspirations or your ambitions to have the same tourism experiences that everybody else has. So turning to the next panel, we have best practice tour operators. we hear from tour operators with experience in catering to travellers with access needs. And first, we have Kerstin Beise, has an extensive background in community-based rehabilitation and inclusive development. She's run the Accessible Indonesia program since 2015, providing accessibility training and assessments to guide the development of accessible tours in Bali, Java, and South Sulawesi. Clair Crowley is the founder of Push Adventures with her husband Scott, who became a paraplegic following a snowboarding accident in 2014. By building awareness and working directly with tourism professionals, Push Adventures aims to build awareness and assist tourism providers to become more inclusive in their offerings. Jezza Williams is the CEO of Making Trax, and he has more than 2 decades of experience in the tourism industry. The first decade was spent as an adventure tour guide, and for the last 10 years, following an accident that left him a quadriplegic, he has been providing New Zealand's signature extreme travelling experiences to people with disability. Nithi Subhongsang, or Nutty, began his tourism career in 1999 and developed a strong interest in community-based and sustainable tourism. In 2017, Nutty's Adventures hosted its first group of 12 blind travellers from England, and in 2019, the company started planning tours for wheelchair users and organising training courses. Nutty, I'll start with you because I saw quite a recent post about training. Now, you ran a very interesting little training course recently. Would you like to tell us about that?
So about the training course, is starting from what we provide opportunity for people to travel. Is start from what we think is from the principle, idea, or concept of to run the business. Is the responsible tourism and inclusive of the people. Everyone should have an opportunity to travel. So when we start the operate the tour for blind people from UK, we quite be interested. Another thing that we think, if more people come to Thailand, but we have no or less people to understand or don't know how to run this kind of tour, it's very important to make balance between the marketing or promoting and training.
So you ran recently. I saw you had a group of people that you took with different disabilities.
I say it again.
You ran a recent fact-finding tour with people with different disabilities.
Yes.
Wheelchair. Perhaps you could talk about that experience and why you did that.
Again, is the key message is the opportunity. How, if we think about the responsible tourism, everybody is a member of the social, yes, and we think everybody should have an opportunity to travel, and even wherever they are. If we have an opportunity, again, for us too, we research a lot with from academic side and many government units to help us, but basically they start with how to do it, but no one bring it to practice. This is what Nutty Adventures we try to seek any possibility to design the tour and opportunity for people. It's a trend again. 10 days ago, for example, we bring 8 people from 4 different groups. We have 2 blind travelers, we have 2 wheelchair users, and 2 deaf person and elderly people to test our tour, to seek, and that destination is in Lyn, in the northeastern of Thailand. Is really remote and no one will think of this destination can ready for everybody to go.
So basically, it was almost like a fact-finding tour, but you're also getting feedback on your operations, but also feedback on the destination, on the accessibility of the destination from, importantly, different groups, groups with different access needs.
Yes, and that feedback is really valuable for not only for us and for our stakeholders who understand how sometimes, you know, like many places they build the accessible access to that place, but they never test it. They never bring the user to try. Sometimes you have very, you know, they like for some unit they invest lots of money, but it doesn't mean use or it's impossible to use. You know, you have a ramp, but it may be not be able to use it. You know, for us, before we design any tours, we ask our friends and networking to come and test and tell us the feedback, what to develop or what is good, what is not good.
So again, it's not good enough to design something. You actually have to test it out and make sure that it really works for actual real people. It's really important.
Exactly.
So turning to you, Kerstin, I mean, we heard that you've established Accessible Indonesia. Why did you do that?
Why? Well, I started with travel agency friends of mine. We said together we had that idea to add a unit for inclusive tourism with them, and the reason for them was because they found the idea very interesting. They found it might be a niche, it might be an opportunity to add to their business. For me, it was just interesting to try to see what is possible in Indonesia, because so far in 2015-16 there was really almost nothing in Indonesia available. There was one accessible car with a lift in all Indonesia, for all Indonesia, so there was just nothing.
Which is a country of how many people?
Almost 200 million. So
yes.
yeah, well, very amazing. And meanwhile, it has improved much. So there are 5 cars now. Imagine 5, and that is a big progress. And most of the tourism.
As a developing economy with a less developed infrastructure, you know, what are, I mean, apart from the challenges with regard to transport, which we've heard from a previous panel, is really important to have those transport networks in place. What other challenges do you face, and how do you overcome them?
Well, there are challenges really everywhere, and the most developed in that sense area is Bali, obviously, but there are so many other places to see in Sulawesi, so we just almost cannot go to those places. But Bali itself is already very challenging infrastructure. The awareness of in hotels and restaurants, in places, sightseeing places, is very minimum. People just don't see the value, don't see how they could make things more accessible, more inclusive. So we have to advocate all the time, and there is really no support from the government to change things. There's a little bit of planning, but it's not implemented. So there are really challenges at every step, and we have to improvise a lot. We have to make things work. We work with the local people who are very willing to help. But this improvising means that we really have to tell the guests before that things are not perfect, are not completely accessible at all, and
because most of your guests come from more developed economies and they're more used to developed infrastructure that's more accessible.
Absolutely. So yes, indeed, most come from Europe, from Germany, where I'm from, and often, one of the problems is really that people think Bali is such a well-known place that it must be pretty accessible, and they underestimate really that it is not. That it's, as we heard before, that hotel might be okay, but then as soon as you go out of the hotel, there's just nothing anymore, and people underestimate that, and also underestimate, not everybody, of course, but people who are not so very experienced with traveling, how exhausting it can be to travel in a tropical country, in a country that is really very, very, very hot. Distances are long, roads are not smooth, and it's really, it's hard for many people. And then they realize that only when they're sitting in the car for 2 or 3 hours and not even arriving at the destination. So we try to explain that as in detail as possible to people beforehand. We offer assistance. We offer a person who assists them, not as a carer, but just as a person who runs all the small errands that need to be done, like just where can I get a bottle of beer in the evening, which is really a difficult thing to achieve. So these kind of things, yeah.
Yeah, a fixer, somebody to facilitate things is important.
Yeah. But of course, people prefer to be independent, and that is always the thing. We don't want to give them the impression that we don't think they are capable of traveling alone. But it's just to try to explain that it is not so easy in Indonesia and Bali. Maybe it's still possible, but out of that, it's always a balance, to not disencourage people, of course, from coming.
Yeah, it is. It's always a challenge in the developing economy and with less developed infrastructure. But as you say, if you manage, one of your things is to manage expectations before people get there, and then to offer additional support when they do arrive.
Yeah.
Claire, now until COVID hit, your company, The Good Scout, did offer accessible tourism experiences around Australia. Do you think you're going to plan to start up that business again once the borders reopen?
Probably not, Martin. I realized in our attempt to build the travel planning platform that the problem was that the industry still didn't know how to provide the right level of information so that we could actually make, the right decisions and plan our experiences. So it actually uncovered a lot more barriers to, an inclusive future than what I, had envisioned. And so it's just reiterated to me that there still needs to be so much work done with operators so that they understand, what is access, what is inclusion, how they can do more, and how it actually has an impact on the user at the end of the day. Because, if they get it wrong and someone, you miss someone's expectations, it's devastating for a family that might have been planning that holiday for a year or, maybe 2 years. So it just uncovered, that I care much more about equipping industry with the skills, to create those inclusive experiences and welcome, everybody through their doors to have the experience that they want.
So that's why you established Push Adventures. Now, Push Adventures, tell us exactly what you do with Push Adventures.
Sure. So we work with industry professionals to help them be more inclusive. So, it often starts with them helping them identify, what they currently have, where there might be some barriers and gaps that they can improve upon, and, how they can literally create that welcoming environment. I mean, I think that we've, already heard today about how information is so important, but, if operators don't understand what information to provide, they still can't do it right. So there's just so much education and awareness raising that still needs to be done so that, people can all play their part in providing, or setting the right scene so that people could make good decisions and can have the experience.
So you're approaching mainstream tourism service providers, and how receptive are they?
Oh, they're amazing. So I think because at this stage they still lack confidence in in the experiences that they offer and that they can offer to so many people of with all specific needs. But because they've never been had it confirmed that you're actually doing this really well, or perhaps you can do this better, they just lack that confidence. But the confidence is twofold. So once the operator understands how inclusive they are, then it gives confidence to the travel to book that experience. So there's still so much work to be done, but I think once they understand the impact of getting it right, or being welcoming, it changes the game. Once they start to realize that it's not all about perfectly physical accessible environments, that there is so much in their control that they can do tomorrow without spending too much money to be inclusive. So I think once that door of that conversation is opened up, then they're on their way.
This is the point that Ashley made in the last session as well. It's boosting the confidence, their confidence to provide experiences, and people, I think, need to realize that there is no such thing as perfectly accessible or fully accessible. There's just degrees of accessibility, and if tourism providers can just simply let the public know what facilities they have, then people can decide for themselves whether or not that suits them.
That's right.
They don't have to say, oh, we're accessible with it, we're accessible this, we're accessible that. Just show what facilities there are, and then people can make their own decisions.
Yeah, that's right. Even the confidence to use the right language. So avoiding saying things like, yeah, we're fully wheelchair accessible, or, you know, or we're all inclusive, you know, just helping them recognize some of those little things that they can start to change, you know, but just got to get started.
I'm sure, Jezza, this chimes in with you, because I mean we've seen an explosion in recent years of dedicated accessible tourism tour operators and tour operators who rely on tried and trusted service providers that already cater to travelers with disabilities. But you have a very different approach. Can you explain what your approach is?
Yeah, so making Trax in New Zealand, we believe that it's about the customer service. So we call it advanced customer care. And what basically for what Making Trax does within New Zealand is we provide a quality mark. So we're giving a seal of approval to all of the companies that we work with. So what we call it is the inclusive tourism movement. Now, we at Making Trax, we're just advisors. So what I'm doing is I'm gathering as many operators and industry to join the inclusive movement. And what that means, it's a relationship with Making Trax. We are the experts of the link between what is needed and what is needed to be educated within the industry. And then that also, with that education, what that's providing is appropriate information for the client to participate. And for that information to be provided, the operator and the industry needs to be educated. And if that education's there and they start bringing in clientele, then everybody's learning. So basically what we're doing is we are training every single operator to be able to have that confidence, to be able to make a very, you know, not a perceived idea of a client, but an awareness of the client. So either the operator or the client can adapt, but it doesn't mean that every human that goes through their door can do an operation, because every environment, as in every ability, is totally different. Like myself, I don't want to go class 5 heli rafting anymore. Okay, I'm a C5 tetraplegic. It's very, very unhealthy. And if I swam, I'd probably drown. And my mum doesn't want to do it either, but she's not a tetraplegic. And what you'll find if you go onto any rafting operation, you will see that they are aware of this and they will explain that to their clients. If they are aware of every other client, i.e. have a relationship with a consultancy firm like Making Trax, then we can provide that information to that company, so the company is making an informed decision for the client, but the client has got the appropriate information to make the appropriate decision whether or not to partake in that activity. So what we would like to see is anybody can drive into any activity or sit in front of their own computer and book an activity in the safety of their own home, knowing exactly what they will get. So in New Zealand, we're extremely lucky. For a start, if you pay around a mid-range accommodation, 90% of them will be an accessible accommodation. People don't travel to New Zealand for accommodation. People don't travel to New Zealand to use a toilet. They come here for adventure. They come here to be in the wilderness. They come here because it's an absolutely splendidly beautiful place, like Australia, like Indonesia, like Thailand.
Yep.
And that same with is that this adventure environment is not accessible, nor will it ever be accessible. But it's always inclusive, because inclusivity comes with education and inclusion. If there's a need for things extra, like say a basic adaptation, then we would assist the company to get a very safe, cost-effective, multi-use harness or adaptation to be in place. But of course, there's a huge amount of work to be done. Even saying New Zealand, yes, we've got heaps of action, we've got heaps of activities, but there's still so much more for us to do. And that's more for the industry to understand, because the industry will only change if they have incentive. The only way they'll get incentive is if they have bums on seats. The only way they're going to get bums on seats is through inclusive tourism. So inclusive tourism builds accessibility.
So success breeds success, and we've heard this before. If businesses realize that how big the market is by making small changes and being more welcoming and getting more guests, then the success will breed success. But it's very interesting, Claire and Jezza, that basically what you're both doing really is a question of education and advocacy among the tourism service providers. So it's not just people with disability who benefit from information and education. It's also the tourism service providers who greatly benefit from that. Now, Jezza, I mean, Kerstin was saying that she has next to no support from the authorities. I think you've had a lot of success, and I think Claire has as well. So perhaps, Jezza, you can tell us about the successes you've had in engaging the National Tourism Organisation and other and local destination management organisations.
Yeah, so in New Zealand, we're very lucky that we're small, and it's like a club. The tourism industry is like a club. So I think where we've had huge success in New Zealand is we don't look at the industry, and I know everybody's been talking money, but the money's not there, and the money won't come there. But what we have to realize is that it's social change that needs to happen. So what's happening right now within the industry is everybody's getting behind inclusion, which is amazing and awesome. But what we have to realize also, in New Zealand, we've got a huge difference within the disability sector and the non-disability sector. If you ask me, there shouldn't be a difference because everybody's abilities are different: emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever. Okay, so the important thing is for the industry, and when I talk about industry, I'm also talking about government, to understand the power of what is done through the idea of integration and inclusion. And this is where it comes down to it. And this is why Making Trax is all about opening the industry and working with the industry. Yes, we help the client. Yes, we want to empower the client to be able to go and do it, but the industry needs to change. The reason the industry needs to change is where they have had segregation, even in New Zealand, which is meant to be a very liberal country, but we've got nearly, I think it's up to about 67% of people in New Zealand with an unemployment rate in the disability sector from the age of 15 to the age of 63. There's 48% say they have got issues with mental well-being. There is no incentive for people to get out and live to their potential. So what happens is people with disabilities, they end up with depression. With depression comes unhealthy, comes overweight, comes hospitalization. With people relying on the government, rather than getting a job, without getting training in schools, with being segregated in schools, what happens is they will never get proper employment and they won't live to their potential. What that happens in turn is governments have to start providing funding for these people with disabilities. I couldn't tell you the number of finance that goes out weekly in New Zealand to the disability sector, but with 1.1 million people in this country, trust me, and we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars that can be saved if people understand living to their potential, they understand inclusion and integration, and they understand that in an outdoor environment, people excel in challenging environments. Not only does the human that is taking the tour or the person that is on the tour or the individual that may have a disability, they start learning about everybody, and that is about integration. We call it adventure-based learning. You can call it adventure therapy. You can call it a number of things. If you can start integrating people within society, community, operators, education, all the way through, then trust me, you're going to save millions of lives and dollars. And that is the important part of integration through tourism and travel.
So it's part of a greater movement towards social equity.
Exactly.
Nutty, I know that as I've referenced before, the 2017 Tourism for All UNWTO conference, which was held in Bangkok, and your tourism minister at the time was very supportive of inclusive tourism, and indeed, I know subsequent to that summit in Bangkok, she established a number of accessible routes through Thailand.
It's not the cooperating with stakeholders. They do promoting, they do like individual unit, like for example, some place they can make some accessibility path or thing, but it never come together as a services or tours. For example, how people come from their home to travel is still question mark. Governments, one of their policy is to support the people with disability, but you know, it's still individual, unit by unit, not come together to make it.
It's not joined up. So the number of different accessible routes that the tourism ministry developed in 2017, 2018 are simply routes that are not connected to any other part of the tourism infrastructure.
Not really. For example, if you talk about the destination, yes, they may say this is possible to people to come, but how to get there? No one will think about this. So this is a part of our thinking. If we have to educate, we have to make people understand, not just knowing it's access, it's tourism for all, is tourism for all, but how to do it, how to combine all services, start from their home and bring them back home. You know, it's quite still lots of challenge for us.
Yeah, and I think that points to the fact that it's the whole tourism value chain needs to be accessible. It's not just establishing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 accessible routes through a country. And also, I know that these accessible routes in Thailand, there was a very glossy, a very kind of nice-looking brochure that was provided, produced by the tourism ministry, but it was only in Thai, so nobody outside the country ever learned about these accessible routes.
We try our best to promote this. You know, we have planned. We have a very good progress to both side training and preparing, and try to promote. In last year, we said we have a theme for that. We plan to visit for travel show around the world to promote accessible Thailand tourism for all. But of course, as the reason everyone know, we stuck by COVID.
Well, good luck with good luck with taking that on the road and promoting Thailand as an accessible destination. Kerstin, Bali is just opening up again. It's just in the last few days, actually. Do you see the opportunity of being able to so-called build back better after COVID? And if so, is there anything you can be doing, or is there anything you plan to be doing to help the tourism industry build back better and more inclusive?
Well, I wish I could say yes, but I'm actually not very optimistic. But I try to be optimistic. The problem is, of course, Bali has been suffering so much during the last 1.5 years, and many small service providers just collapsed and are not there anymore. So we ourselves have to start from scratch. We have to see what is left, who is still there, and survey everything again. And I can imagine that that the local government, the temple authorities and so on, they are just focusing now on just getting their stuff back, and they won't be very much concerned about being inclusive and being accessible. That is my fear. Of course, we will try our best. We have established a small working group in Bali with local service providers who are also working in the field of inclusive tourism. And we will try to advocate as much as possible to the government, the hotels and everything, hoping that we can create some awareness. But I do think it will just take even longer now after the pandemic, because the pandemic has really caused a lot of damage to everything, also to the trust of people, I believe, from Europe to come to travel to a country like Indonesia and to believe that it's safe in terms of COVID and of vaccinations and so on. So I think it will take a while, but we have to be optimistic and work together and do a lot of advocacy. That's what we have been doing from day one. We have to approach governments and service providers and just try to make them aware of the advantages they will have if they are more inclusive,
and of the size of the market, because Bali is almost entirely dependent on tourism for its income.
Absolutely, yes, that is it. Yeah.
You've had some success in engaging destination management organizations.
Yeah, that's right. I think that one of the first things I did, Martin, when we, it started up with Push Adventures, was go and meet with the Regional Tourism Operator Board. So there's, a representative from each of the 12 regions in South Australia, and just educating them at the first point was, I think, one of the smartest things perhaps I did, not really knowing, how well it was going to work out for me, but because they then are like ambassadors that, go back into the regions and, they now have increased awareness. And so when their operators, are talking about, improving or, working on their businesses, accessibility and inclusion is part of their thought process. So I think that having somewhere for operators to go and know who to reach out to, is a really important tool, because although the regional, bodies are not actually providing the experiences, they're really key, personnel in this chain. And you just touched on that the whole tourism chain or the value chain, needs to be linked up to create those inclusive experiences. And so, they're kind of the glue, I guess, that helps bring that value chain together. So, that they know the transport to get to their regions, they know the experiences, they know the accommodation, they can help bring all those things together. So I think that it's probably, not as well identified the role that, the industry professionals in regions can play in this space. And one of the other things that I think has, helped with our success is pushing for grant and award programs. So, although we don't want it to be about money and, needing recognition, it absolutely helps. So, if people think that there's a pot of money that they might need, on their journey to be more inclusive, that makes them feel empowered that they, it is possible now. It just helps, it just builds that picture that, helps them realize that they can do something, that they are going to make a difference. Because the last thing we want to do is that the operators feel like they are just overwhelmed and they don't know, how to take on that journey to be more inclusive. So I think that, having some of those carrots are, really important in the bigger picture.
The tourism destination management organizations are offering support in terms of being there with advice and with practical information. But also, I think it's important to note that what destination management organizations can also do is promote their destinations as being suitable for people with access needs to visit. So it's a question of them promoting marketing and promoting destinations, and we have some great examples in Europe of national and local destination management organizations, and I'm thinking particularly of Germany and Spain and England and Flanders, who promote their destinations as accessible, and also then are, as you say, the glue between all the different service providers, and can provide a lot of information that spans all elements of the tourism chain, so that people can get a lot of information about all aspects of the tourism value chain from the destination management organizations, who then provide support to the individual organizations.
Yeah, and further than that, the operators, if they reach out to a knowledgeable contact at the regional tourism board, they're going to feel like they've got support, like to do this. Like they're going to feel like yeah, it's possible. Like they're not going this alone. There's going to they might be able to share resources or share experiences, or like they'll just feel more empowered and confident to go down that path and see what's possible.
That's great. Jezza, how are you finding in terms of marketing and promotion of New Zealand as an accessible destination? Is that happening?
Yeah, we're starting to get there, Martin. I think when I talk, because again, we work a lot with the RTOs and the tourism industry and
Sorry, can you RTOs?
RTOs, yeah, the regional tourism associations
Thank
here
you.
in New Zealand. So the main thing I think with New Zealand is, what Making Trax has done is we do go in and we do take a lot of video content. We do take a lot of media content, and we spread that around. And when we do spread it around, we're actually, if you go onto Tourism New Zealand and you go into the accessible part of their website, you'll see the Making Trax films that we've been putting together. If you go to Destinations Queenstown and you go onto their website, then again, you'll see the Making Trax videos that we've created. And I'm really pushing hard, like we can make everything inclusive. We can make everything accessible. But if nobody knows about it, then it's never going to be used. So it's really, promotion is key. And it's not promotion as in background promotion. It's what tourism destinations should be. Even countries as a whole should be promoting inclusion as a total, because of course we've got every other diversity within inclusion, but and also the disability sector. It's about empowering everybody. As you said before, it's like only pretty attractive humans travel, according to the marketing factors of the world. And yeah, that's all well and good, because it's it looks good and it sells, but it's important to create everybody. It's like the South African, they did that really beautiful promotional sector that they did in South Africa quite a few years ago. It was amazing, about that man that had a vision impairment. And then there was the other one with the Change Your Destination that the WTO put together as well. That it's about mainstream. If we can mainstream our promotion, then it makes everybody aware of possibilities. And again, that goes into the integration and inclusion part of creation of travel.
That's right. And that's I said that exactly in the last session. It's not a question of if we build it, they will come. It's if we build it and promote it and let people know it's there, then they will come. And
exactly.
the more people that come, the more people will spread the word. Because somebody mentioned the Facebook group, the Accessible Travel Club, and that's one of many forums. Because among the disability communities, it has to be said that people rely very much on word of mouth. I've been there, I've done that, you can do that too. And people asking others for advice. Oh yes, I've done that trip, and this is what you have to look out for, and this is how good this and that place is. So a lot of the promotions is by word of mouth. It's very interesting though, Jezza, that you are producing promotional materials that are then being picked up by destination management organizations. Frankly, I've got to ask you, are they supporting you financially to produce promotional material?
Well, the thing is, in New Zealand, I run an organisation, so the tourism destination places, they do not. We go in and do it ourselves, and like I'm hoping, if anybody in Tourism New Zealand's watching this, you know the story. So yeah, I believe that the tourism destinations should be financing their own promotional value, but I do realize that if you want the job done properly, you do it yourself. So I'm all about, I like the job done properly, I'll do it myself. And then what I'm doing is I'm creating the inclusive movement. But in saying that too, every operator that works with Making Trax, they belong to the Making Trax movement, and they pay a subscription to belong to that movement. And that there means that every organization that's part of the Making Trax movement, which is over 50 at the moment, they actually do pay to be part of the movement. So all of my operators that are the inclusive tourism operators that are in the directory in New Zealand, they pay to be part of the inclusive movement. So yes.
And to get your seal of approval as such.
Well, that's part of the movement. It's more of an ongoing service. So they've always got me and my team at Making Trax to assist them in any information, any education, any promotion, anything that they need. So we work together as a whole community. So it's like a family, if you like. And we work, I know all of my operators. I know the CEOs, the marketing managers. I know them extremely well on first name basis. Like this morning, for example, I organized a young man who's a complete C4 quadriplegic, no arm movement, only head movement, to jump out of an aeroplane at 20,000 feet in Franz Joseph. So he's had a really good talk with Robbie, who's the operations manager. He's also an incredibly competent skydiving master, and I can just have a conversation like a mate, and we go through the whole process. Prior to, it's not till the 5th, so it's another 2 weeks. They're even going to jump a guy out of the plane prior to for a training session. They're going to film it all. They're going to do all of this, and they're doing that out of the goodness of that company, because they're part of that Making Trax movement. So everybody I work with, you know, is an active, proud member of Inclusive New Zealand, which is why I do things myself, like doing promotional filming, because I'm influencing everybody else. I'm the leader, I'm the motivator, I'm the educator, but they together, we are the movement. So if I don't go out of my way to influence and to expand and to grow, it won't happen, because Tourism New Zealand won't be doing it, TIA won't be doing it, and if somebody else does it that hasn't quite got the industry level or skill that I have, it won't be done to the level that I want it done. So that's why we excel to the way that we do, I believe.
All power to you, Jezza, and I think in that sense you are actually very fortunate to have to be living in an economy which is small enough to be able to have an influence for one organization, and someone as driven as yourself to have an influence. Nutty, how do you intend, as the country reopens again and as tourism starts again, how do you propose to market and promote the accessible tourism offerings that your company is offering to travelers?
So again, we quite ready for welcome and restart the tourism back to normal as soon as possible, and to promote the accessible tourism in Thailand for other. We have to work with our old partners like Seable in UK, and of course
just so people know, Seable are a company in the UK who specialize in also in kind of quite adventure travel for blind and vision impaired tourists mainly to Sicily.
Yes, and yes, that's the one we try. And of course we want now I propose many some project like the research project to many government units, and also I work with many academic part like Mahidol University International College, for example. This is the way we can make everyone sure that Thailand be ready to welcome people. This is the kind of promoting, but do it as the case, you know, not just sometimes when you see the brochure or see the program and you never trust. It's quite difficult for this market segment. So a bit by bit, we have more experience and more networking to work with. This is the way we try to do promoting accessible to Thailand. Yes.
So through networking, largely through networking than from direct sales and promotion.
Yes.
Right. Well, thank you all very much indeed. We're sort of coming to the end of the session. It's been very enlightening to hear from all of you, and actually very heartening in most cases. I mean, Kerstin, I think you're probably facing more hurdles than most, and I wish you all the best in trying to as tourism starts back up in Bali and Indonesia. I would like to finish the session with another of Making Trax videos, if I may, because it really does show that, you know, people with access needs and people with disabilities should not limit themselves, and there's a mindset among travelers themselves that limits what they think they can do because they don't see the possibilities. And I think what's great about your videos, Jezza, is that it allows people to see the possibilities of what they might be able to do. So thank you for producing your videos. I think they're great.
Thank you very much, Martin. Everybody gets to see more.
My cool, I'm on the edge. Something's taking over me. I will be down on my knees. You know I'm ready for this. You keep me begging for this. I'm chasing the feeling. I know what to wear, and I just can't resist. Yeah, I just can't resist. I do what I do. Ain't got nothing to prove. So baby, roll with this. Yeah, baby, roll with this. I can do this all day. I can do this all day. Back up on the run this town. I'm headed for the top, and you know it's going down. I could do this all day. Take your best shot, show me what you got. No, you can't resist. You know I'm ready for this. I just do what I do. I ain't got nothing to prove, so just roll with this. Yeah, baby, roll with this. I can do this all day. Do this all day. Back up on the run this town. I'm headed for the top, and you know it's going down. I can do this all day. I can do this all day. I'm taking over.
Well, I'm looking forward to a long planned visit to New Zealand to engage in some of these activities. Many of these things I did in Catalonia, including hot air ballooning and motor paragliding, sailing, um, and also using a trail rider going off road on a trail one wheeled wheelchair, which was absolutely fantastic. So there are plenty of places around the world that offer these exciting tourism experiences, and I encourage anybody who's hesitant to go for it. Just so today, I'll just finish off. Today we've heard from both sides of the fence, as it were, from people with disability who make a living through travel, and from people who make a living by providing or helping to provide travel experiences to people with access needs. I see both groups as being equally important to the growth of inclusive or accessible tourism. Much has been said recently about representation in the context of diversity and inclusion. Positive role models from disadvantaged or minority groups, be they people of color, women, or people living with disability, have been shown to be essential to increase levels of achievement amongst those groups. This is particularly true when it comes to disabled people traveling. When getting around your local community can be fraught and frustrating because of infrastructural and attitudinal barriers, how much more difficult would it be to imagine taking an overseas trip? Just by getting out on the road and writing about it, accessible travel bloggers are performing an important service. But it doesn't stop there. They provide invaluable information verified by personal experience that gives other people with disability both the means and the confidence to travel themselves. They're also in a position to advocate directly to service providers in all sectors, giving advice and providing feedback so that future visitors have a better experience. On the other side of the coin, there is a growing network of dedicated accessible tourism service providers and tour operators around the world, capitalizing on a large and growing market. And indeed, there is a crossover. Both Cory and Sylvia have used their own travel experiences to become tour organizers themselves. Equally importantly, as we've heard from everyone in the second session, are efforts to educate and train tourism service providers from the mainstream to be able to cater better to people with access needs, whether they identify as disabled or not. More often than not, a flexible mindset and a willingness to adapt among both tourism service providers and travelers themselves leads to more people being able to enjoy more experiences, no matter what their limitations might be. So I'd like to finish by thanking the panelists for their contributions today, but even more for their ongoing efforts to make travel more inclusive. Quite simply, I love your work. So many thanks to our audience today as well, and I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible again tomorrow.